Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Missoula, Montana, where 99 years ago today, on October 3rd, 1909, there was a historic free speech fight right on this corner, front and Higgins, 99 years ago today. Historical because it was the first big free speech fight in the country. Free speech right now is under attack. So we are very happy to have a scholar who has studied Cliff Works, has written a book about the Sedition Act, and he talks about the free speech fights that happened in Missoula, Montana 99 years ago today. Front and Higgins, September and October of 1909. So ladies and gentlemen, gather around because we are going to exercise our right to free speech, which was won and fought for right here in Missoula 99 years ago. Please join us. Thank you.
All right. Well, 99 years ago, this was a very different place, but actually the building here, the Florence Hotel, was standing, although it looked a lot different. Between then and now, it actually burned down twice. But it looked quite different because the street, for one thing, was a dirt street, and the sidewalks, such as they existed, were made of wood. So if you can imagine what it looked like at the time, it was somewhat similar, but actually pretty different. But Missoula, small town, was trying to make something of itself. Was trying to be kind of a mercantile center in this part of Montana, and the city fathers had a festival that they called the Apple Festival. At that time, a lot of apple orchards were being planted in this area, and so their sort of event of great pride in Missoula was the Apple Festival that came along in the fall. Well, that, of course, wasn't the only thing that came along in the fall. There were a lot of itinerant workers who roamed the West in search of jobs. And usually they didn't spend very much time on one job. They usually worked from one job to another. And a lot of this was the fault of the employment agencies in town. And basically they had this scam going where they would charge a fee to find a person a job. The person would pay the fee, go out to the job site, and work for a few days, and then by prearrangement would be fired. And then there would be kickbacks all around, and the worker would have to go back and pay another fee to find another job. And that was just one of the ways in which workers were terribly exploited. In addition to, of course, to low pay and miserable working conditions. And the main areas there in this town, of course, were agriculture, timber, and some mining. So all of these itinerant workers roaming through town were ideal population to be organized by union organizers. And just a few years before, in 1905, the IWW had organized in Chicago, really in reaction to the excesses of capitalism, and there were many. And one of the prime targets, or one of the prime areas for the IWW was the West. So they sent organizers into the West to see if they could organize people into this new kind of labor union called the IWW. One of the organizers that arrived in Missoula in the summer of 1909 was Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, who was just barely 19 years old. And she and her husband actually came here in 1909. Another famous IWW organizer who came at the same time was Frank Little, and he arrived in town, we believe, around September 22nd of 1909. And about the same time that Frank Little came into town, they immediately, sort of the energy level rose in the organization effort, and they started trying to organize people. Well, in Missoula, there was an ordinance that prohibited speaking on the street. And the ordinance was only selectively enforced. So that, for example, the Salvation Army, if they wanted to sing and preach on the street, usually they weren't harassed. But if people who were labor organizers were on the street, well, then they were immediately picked on and arrested. So in this organizing effort, they began to be arrested, and they redoubled their efforts and the Wobblies continued to speak on the street, and more of them were arrested. And they were thrown into prison, and other people came to their defense and realized that they could be arrested simply for uttering 4 words: fellow workers and friends, which was usually the beginning of a talk by a Wobbly. And people would start with a speech, and they would say, fellow workers and friends, and immediately a cop would haul them off. And a young man who was watching one of these speeches came down, who was employed by the Forest Service, a young man named Herman Tucker, came down from his office. He was so enraged by this, and he started to recite the Declaration of Independence. And he was arrested and hauled off to prison. Well, pretty soon, the jails were full, and all the Wobblies were demanding individual jury trials. And as they would as they would make bail, they would go out back onto the sidewalk and be arrested again. And this constant back and forth was putting an enormous stress on the town of Missoula and on the law enforcement, but it was raising a great deal of commotion in town, and people were wondering what is going on as these crowds were getting bigger and bigger around this organization, around the Wobblies. Gurley Flynn herself and another woman were arrested, actually on this day, on October 3rd of 1909, and that caused a huge ruckus. This process went on for several days. Actually, it started right around the last part of September and continued until about the 8th of October, when the city realized that with its little apple festival coming up, there would be a huge black eye to have this demonstration and all these unruly Wobblies in jail. So the town basically capitulated. And they said, okay, well, we're not going to enforce the ordinance against you. You're free to speak on the street. So that was a victory for the Wobblies. And the Wobblies learned from that, that this was a great tool, this was a great mechanism for attracting people to their cause, for getting dues and payments, and spreading the word of their mission and their cause. So they carried this on almost immediately to Spokane, where 3 Wobblies were killed and thousands of people were arrested. But that, in fact, ended up with the same result. In about March of 1910, the city of Spokane capitulated. And then the Wobblies carried on other free speech fights from 1909 until 1915, by which time they were probably the one of the most feared and despised group in the country for what. But at the same time, they were, I believe, very brave in their stand, not only for labor rights but also for free speech. So here today we're commemorating what is actually the 99th anniversary of the arrest of Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and the beginning of a series of events that eventually made the Wobblies probably enemy number 1 in the United States just before World War I. Enemy of the establishment of the industrialists of the ruling class. Certainly not of the people. So that's just a really brief history, and I'm glad to be here today to commemorate that.
Would you mind telling us a little about what year did Frank Little die?
Frank Little was here for that event in 1909, and he continued to organize and just bravely waded into all kinds of fights, and then in 1917, after war had been declared, he came to Butte and gave a series of fearless talks. One, trying to get workers to continue to strike, and 2, speaking against the war and also against the Anaconda Copper Mining Company. And what he said really just outraged enough people that he was hauled from his room in his boarding house on the morning of August 1st, dragged from behind a car, and hung from the Anaconda trestle, and his body was found the next morning. So that was on August 1st of 1917. That event then led, or let me just back up one little bit. When Little was making all of these speeches in Butte, people called for his arrest under the federal espionage law, which was being enforced as a sedition law. And they said to U.S. Attorney Burton K. Wheeler and Federal Judge Borquin, this man should be arrested and imprisoned. And because these were very independent-minded men, Borquin and Wheeler refused to charge Little. And unfortunately, then he was lynched. But one of the results of that was that Montana then passed its own sedition law in 1918, and under that, almost 80 people were convicted of sedition and sent away to prison for up to 20 years for doing nothing but criticizing the government. And under that law, or that law existed actually on the books until 1973, or a peacetime version of that law existed until 1973. So I wrote a book about that, and then also a movie was made recently called "Jailed for Their Words," which has just been released. The film will be on Montana PBS starting on October 23rd. You can find out more from the website at seditionproject.net.
Thank you. Somebody needs to talk about this. He wants to tell about planting.
So I'm Brent, and I'm from the Missoula Two Rivers General Membership Branch of the IWW. And I'm here to tell you about a campaign we're going to try to get going to get a monument commemorating the free speech fights that happened here. We're hoping to get the city council and probably some historic preservation folks together to actually get a permanent soapbox on this corner made of bronze that can be I guess a testament to Missoula's involvement in the free speech movement across the American West, since it did start here. And so I guess we're just going to try to cool. Okay. So we're going to try to get that going over the next year and hopefully have that ready for the 100th anniversary of the Missoula Free Speech Fights next year on October 3rd, 2009. That's pretty much it. I'm going to hand this off to someone else, and we're just going to start free speeching it now.
Nice and loud. Is there a volume on? Yeah, there is. I just turned the volume all the way up. Nice. It's gonna be awesome. Hi, everybody. I've got a little bit of stage fright, so just smile at me and everything will be great. What I do for a living right now, I call people on the telephone and I ask them questions about politics. I'm that guy who disturbs your dinner hour right now. That's my job. Please be kind to him next time he calls, by the way. Anyway, last night I called a lady who was real worried about the economy, and she told me she had another idea for a bailout plan, right? I thought this was a good idea. I like her idea. She said that we ought to give every American citizen $250,000. I figured it out, I did the math, that's $7 million instead of, what is it now, $800 billion, right? 7 million, so that's a whole lot cheaper. It would save us all a whole lot of money, and I can't even imagine anyone in this entire country objecting to getting $250,000, can you? And anyone who got it, right, what would they do with the money? They would go and they'd pay off their home loans, right? We'd all be out of debt, all the banks would get the money they wanted, right? Why is no one...
I'll take some money.
Okay. That guy gets money too. Everybody gets money. Why wouldn't this work? Why haven't we ever had a politician suggest this? It's so much cheaper. It makes so much more sense. One of the main reasons is that if everyone got $250,000 today, no one would be in debt anymore. And if people weren't in debt anymore, there's no way that the banks would gain any money.
Have you ever thought about getting a loan and how it works? What happens? I have a whole lot of money that I don't need, and you are very badly in need of money. I have money that I don't need, and I'm going to charge you money because you need money. Isn't that absurd? That's the cruelest thing I've ever heard of. It's actually, if you're a religious person, it's actually outlawed in the Bible to charge interest on loans. If you're a religious person and a banker, you are a sinner, by the way. I'm not a religious person, but I don't charge interest. I don't have loans. I don't have any money. Yeah. So, what does this show, right? Not that it's a stupid idea to give everyone $250,000. It shows something about the way the banking system is set up, and it shows something about the way that our economy in general runs. It shows that it's incredibly unjust, unfair, and that it's built to screw us. That's all I have to say tonight.
So my fellow worker Joey just talked about the $700 billion giveaway that we just had. Why was $800 billion now that the government just gave to the big corporations? So why was that money not given to provide infrastructure for renewable energy and to get us off foreign oil? Why was that money given to the corporations that own the oil companies and loan money to the oil companies, rather than giving it to the renewable energy companies that's going to make us have a much more sustainable future? So I just really wanted to point that out, that is a lot of money. Like, I heard some ridiculous statistic the other day that if that money was in $100 bills and you stack them one on top of the other, it would be around 400 miles long. So that is a lot of money. So now I'm going to hand this off to some folks that are going to talk about what you can do to change that.
Okay. We're gonna switch hands real quick.
You know, it's a rather sad reality when you realize that the world we live in is one that basically needs us to work for it. The fact is, the environment can no longer take care of itself, and it's something that we have caused. Humanity has done something that is terrible. We're polluting the earth. We're putting fossil fuels up into the air. And we're doing this without even blinking an eye, without even thinking about it for a second. Thank you for riding your bikes, guys. I appreciate it. But we can make a difference. We can change the way this is affecting our world. Because we have an opportunity this November to elect an entirely new group of politicians that can do our bidding. They can do something that's good for the world and good for the environment. Now, there's a great organization online, and I want you guys to check it out. It's called powervote.org. And it's an organization that's dedicated to getting people together to vote for politicians and for leaders that are willing to make a difference, that are willing to focus on the environment, not just on their own pocketbooks and not on the pocketbooks of the big corporations or the people that are putting you out of business. What we need to do is focus on several main goals that will help the environment and help our world out. Now, the first goal that we really need to focus on, and that Vicky's going to talk more about right after me, is green jobs. Working for a big corporation shouldn't mean that you're going to be polluting the earth. It shouldn't mean that your job is bad for the environment. There are plenty of opportunities to help the environment and work at the same time, and those need to be talked about and they need to be offered up. Another goal that we need to focus on is get off our dependence on oil and natural gas and other carbon dioxide emitting resources. The fact is, we have the technology to switch over to solar and wind power, and we can do this easily as long as we're willing to invest the money in it. That's the only problem, is the motivation from people to invest their money in a system that won't pollute the earth. And ultimately, one thing we really need to do is we need to make sure that our politicians and our leaders understand these things. Too many of our leaders are in the back pockets of oil companies and energy companies that want them to make them more money. The fact is, politicians get paid quite well, and they get even more benefits from the companies that they are supporting. What if our politicians, instead of helping an oil company, helped a wind farm or put focus on a solar energy company that was not going to hurt the environment? It's not too far-fetched because this has happened in the past. What we need to do is hold our leaders accountable and tell them that what we want is change. We don't want to help the oil companies out any longer. We don't want to put more money into the back pockets of these oil companies. We want to start transitioning our power over to environmentally friendly sources. Ultimately, what also needs to happen is we need to make sure that the United States is working with other countries on this project. The environment is something that needs to be taken care of, not only here in the United States, but across the world. And so what we can do is take a stand as citizens and demand that we work on a multilateral action with other countries to actually put policies in place that limit the amount of energy that we are consuming that comes from carbon-emitting sources. This is something that needs to be done, and it needs to be done immediately in order to make sure that we don't cause further harm to our Earth. So I would like to encourage people to check out powervote.org to support your local politicians that are fighting for the environment and to do whatever you can to stop the spread of global warming across the world. The fact is, this is a problem that can easily be stopped and easily be solved, and we need to do something about it. Thank you.
I'll apologize in advance for...
Real close.
Like you're in class. Just say it loud.
Hold it right to your mouth.
You may have turned down the volume. It's on the other side.
Now it's over. Don't apologize. You're going to great. Just keep going. Just do it. Don't even apologize.
I apologize in advance for polluting your air with a lot of noise pollution, but every now and then it's important to speak out and remind everyone that in a democracy, it's not just our right but our responsibility to insist that our elected representatives represent our best interests, those at the federal level, state level, and local level. It's high time that we insisted that our tax dollars be invested not in continual bailouts of junk bonds, bad savings and loan schemes, and now subprime mortgages, and also in war, in the Iraq war. We need to invest our hard-earned tax dollars in the future, and that includes converting our economy to a sustainable economy focused on creating green jobs. Green jobs is one of the areas of growing employment, one of the few places where young people can train and feel that they're doing meaningful work and have some real opportunities for future growth in income and expertise. Our College of Technology has a program in alternative energy where people can learn about solar energy, wind energy, insulation, and conservation. We need at every level of government to increase our investment in that sort of economic development. So let's support, let's insist, let's all vote for in the upcoming election for the mill levy to support higher education, and let our university system know that we wanted to invest more of its funds in green job training, and also that we want our state legislature, when it meets, to invest in green job development, and remind our congressional delegation that we would like to see $700 million spent on green job development rather than the sorts of bailouts. With green job development and good regulation of the financial sector, we won't need those kinds of bailouts. And with green job development and getting off of fossil fuels, we won't need to be in places like Iraq killing people for their oil. So, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Front and Higgins. We're celebrating the 99th anniversary of the free speech fights, which were the first free speech victories in the United States. That's why we're here today, to celebrate the people that brought us free speech. The IWW sent people from all over to fill the jails because they were not allowing people to speak on the street. And in September and October of 1909, Front and Higgins, right where we are today, the IWW won a victory and they allowed us to speak on the streets. So we're here today to remind people that freedom of speech has been fought for and won in the streets of Missoula. Now, more than ever, it's important for us to rise up and exercise our right to free speech. So if anybody wants to get up here on the soapbox and join us and give us a minute or two of your mind, Paul Miller, want to get up here?
Main Street.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise up. Stand up for your rights. Join us. We're celebrating the 99th anniversary of the free speech fights that were in Missoula, Montana, Front and Higgins, September and October of 1909. The industrial workers of the world, the one big union, we want all workers in the same union. So if you're a worker and you want to join us, come talk to the people here. The Wobblies want you.
Yeah, it was encouraging.
I told him just read all this.
Hey, Carla, hold it really close to your mouth.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I think United States has a lot of problems right now of our own, and United States is also very, very, very myopic. I know I was particularly myopic in my own world. I think I was about 26 years old before I realized that there was a country that was like the third largest country in South America. I thought it was all just a bunch of jungle. So I've been looking at South America and more around the world, and going to some talks. A very interesting fellow goes down to South America and lives in Arauca. He lives among people that are being kicked off their land, and this is the thing that's happening all over the world. And it's the main reason that there are massive huddles of humanity in certain places that are living in horrid conditions. And so this man, Scott Nicholson, goes down and lives among these people, and he's been doing it since 2006. He lives among the women. The men have all been killed in this state, in this region, because they don't want any resistance. They don't want any unions, and a lot of the men were active trying to get people voting and in the government, the indigenous people, and so they were rewarded by basically being slaughtered or some really bad things. So this is the kind of stuff that goes on around the world so we can have our oil. And I was going to read a little bit about a letter from him, but I couldn't find it on the net. And I'm not going to read this either, I decided, because I've probably talked about it long enough. But
Go ahead and read it. We're patient.
okay. Okay, oil speaks louder than guns. In September 2005, the USGAO issued a report on the efforts to secure the Cano Limon pipeline and how U.S. funds have been used. The Cano Limon pipeline is nearly 500 miles long, originating in Arauca. Operated by U.S. Occidental Oil Company, it generates 20% of Colombia's oil each year. Because of its ties to Colombia and U.S. governments, it has been a prime target for paramilitaries. The largest amount of attacks were in 2001, when 170 separate incidences. Those attacks have drastically dropped because of U.S. intervention and money. The GAO report states that $99 million has been spent in 3 years since 2002 just for equipment and training for the Colombian army. It was in 2002 when the military was strong enough to surround Saravena and incarcerate several thousand people. One of the main uses of the money was to build an army base just outside of Saravena. The report includes photos of the base and details the equipment and the helicopters. Now that all the major paramilitaries are classified as terrorist groups, the U.S. and Colombian government can fight them at all costs. The GAO said that the infusion of U.S. money and technology is so sophisticated that if the pipeline is attacked, monitoring devices are sensitive enough to pick up immediate drop in pressure and signal almost instant military response. Perez says that since the pipeline was opened, the violence has increased. The GAO warned of another phase of the war in Colombia. Occidental has stated that without more exploration, the Cano Limon oil fields will eventually run out. The company says that its best prospects are located in the areas where coca is grown, and I just want to insert that that is the reason why the war on drugs. It has to do with clearing the land of the people that the indigenous people, the people that could not buy the land, but they just happened to be on it since the beginning of time. And so that's why we're down in Colombia. And the best prospects are located in the areas where coca is grown and controlled by the paramilitaries. So that's why we're trying to get rid of the paramilitaries. With massive amount of military in the region, the GAO said that security concerns are no longer outweigh the profit possibilities in the country. And there's 11 pages here, but
Yeah, red guy. Yeah.
I just want to talk to. I wanted to talk to everyone about crystal meth, something that crosses all boundaries. We're having a petition, or not a petition, but we're collecting signatures to show the state that we support the Montana Meth Project. I also wanted to talk about, since this is freedom of speech, dolphins and humans coexisting. I think only when we fully agree with the dolphins, we can live in an undersea world where we can both coexist in a peaceful environment. Dolphins and humans need to work together in order to fight meth and to save Mother Earth. Thank you.
I'll talk a little bit. I love that. Good, I got 4 pages. You guys support
Hello, folks, Missoulians. Yeah, as just mentioned earlier, this is a very symbolic place, exactly where I'm standing, because 99 years ago, there was a free speech fight here amongst people who were standing up for workers' rights. 99 years ago, on this day. And they were thrown in jail repeatedly until finally they gave up on it. But we all have a right to speak freely in this country. And right now, we have a right to speak about what's going on with our so-called bailout.
Yeah.
Now, whether you agree whether it's necessary in any modified form or whatever, but the bailout is also a cop-out. Let's face it. Let's be careful that it's more than just a cop-out. We read today in the paper, we have our congressional delegation from Montana even differs. Baucus voted for the Senate basic redesign of the House bill because he said that it's critical at this time. It isn't perfect, and that we need to do something. The businesses are all with him on that. But our other two people, Senator Jon Tester, Democrat, and Dennis Rehberg, a Republican, have voted no. They're saying we need to look at it and make sure that there are guarantees that the taxpayer isn't going to be the person on the hook. And strangely enough, even Rehberg, who I'm just like our the chairman of the Democratic Party, Dennis McDonald, said he doesn't usually agree with, but he did vote, I believe, right in this situation. Now we're also reading today that we're starting to compare this to the Depression, and they're saying that maybe the reason we need to act now is that we've learned from the Depression. And they're saying, well, Herbert Hoover, you know, he was always blamed because he didn't act soon enough. Well, I don't think we've learned from the Depression. If we'd learned from the Depression, we wouldn't have gotten in the mess to begin with. We wouldn't have had the greed, and just the uncontrolled greed of corporations, making money off of people who are struggling to own homes, giving them credit. All of this greed, if we would have learned from the Depression, we wouldn't be here. We're slow to learn. We didn't learn from Vietnam. I'm a Vietnam veteran. We didn't learn that you can get in a quagmire like that. So what we have to do is make sure that all of this talk about the bailouts, if it does happen, we're in a presidential election race right now too. We want to make sure that our candidates don't forget about their pledges to the American people. Because it's the American people that are suffering the most. The people who can't afford a home, whose mortgages are closed. The people who can't get a job because their jobs were shipped overseas. Wall Street has been investing, but they haven't been investing in the people or investing in our industry. They've been investing in our pockets, deep. We can't allow that to happen. We want to make sure that our candidates know that we still need affordable health insurance for every American. That we need to have good jobs at home. These are things that we need to stand up for. So don't let the bailout be a cop-out. Don't let the bailout be a cop-out. They're going to have a bailout, let's do it responsibly. But let's immediately start working on seeing that we'll never have to have something like this happen again. Let's put regulation in there. They said that FDR, yes, at least he had it right. He started regulating. We've got to start doing that. So I urge you just to make sure that we don't get so caught up in this bailout that we forget that it's the people that really we have to bail the people out. We've got to bail the people out. Thank you.
So I might just stop for a second. I might have to stop for a second. I'm not sure what I'm saying. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that I think that we have lost touch with the rest of the organic world. We no longer worry about what's going on outside of our own worlds and outside of our own lives. We no longer care what happens to other organisms, other species. Any other living organism on the face of the earth is no longer cared for, no longer taken care of, and we need to put a stop to it. The fact is, constantly, every day, we are dumping tons of toxic waste into our oceans, into our streams, and no one worries about it. No one even thinks about it. But the fact is, we need to think about it because this is going to affect us. It's going to come back and haunt us if we don't stop this quickly. But it doesn't stop with the environment. Constantly, we as a human race are no longer taking care of our people. What we need to be doing is recognizing that the earth takes care of us just as much as we take care of each other. If we don't have the ecosystem services that are offered by the earth and that are offered basically just because other organisms are around, we will hurt them to the point where they no longer will take care of us. Things like the water cycle, things like resource cycles that make sure that we have the nutrients that we need in order to survive are what we need to make sure that we live on and that our kids live on. The atmosphere and the earth takes care of itself. It has cycles and other organisms put into the environment, and they do this in such a way that we have a good balance that takes care of life here. And just take a look around. Missoula, Montana is a gorgeous place to live. It's a place that has trees and mountains, and it has living species all around. so much diversity in such a small place. But if we don't take care of the earth, if we don't take care of our resources, if we don't think twice about throwing our toxic waste into our streams, that life will not be there forever. And if that life isn't there for us to live on, for us to depend on, we will not be able to live on this earth the way that we have. We have lost touch with the organic world. No longer are we taking care of the earth, and no longer are we taking care of its species and organisms. But also we have lost touch with what's important in humanity. We don't take care of other human beings the way that we need to. Right now, health insurance is unaffordable for so many Americans that it's shocking. Over 40 million people cannot afford and don't have health insurance. And here's a shocking fact. If you don't have health insurance, your death rate is 25% lower. The average mortality rate is 25% higher than those that have health insurance. So what you can see is that if you do not have health insurance, you are more likely to actually die of a health sickness than someone who has health insurance. That's not fair. We need to have equal rights for people when it comes to health. If you get sick, you deserve to get taken care of just as much as someone who makes $1 million a week. They shouldn't get the health care that you don't get because they have more money than you. What we need is a fair system. We need to take care of human beings. As I said, we're losing touch with the organic world. We don't care about what happens to the average human being. We only care about those that are close to us, within our family. But if you go outside of your the people that you know personally, we no longer worry about what's happening to them. What happens to people that out in big cities? What happens to our homeless population? What happens to people in other countries like Iraq, Iran, or in the Sudan? These are things that no longer concern us and that we no longer worry about. But these are the very things that we need to worry about, because the human race should not be spaced out the way it has been. We need to worry about other human beings because they are just as important as we are to this society. Just like the earth takes care of us, we need to take care of other human beings because they deserve that. And that's exactly what we need to focus on. A big one that is not worried about by people in the United States and around the world is the problem of genocide. Genocide has affected many parts around the world. We have parts in the Sudan, we have Rwanda, but it's also groups that are areas that are completely ignored until the problem is out of control and cannot be stopped. We didn't look into Rwanda until 2 years after the major problems had already started. And that's when news organizations started going in. That's when people started to try to make a difference, and that's when we started to finally care. What we need to do is worry about these problems before they become an issue, before people start to suffer and before lives are lost. We can stop these atrocities before they begin, and we need to take time and worry about them. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, we no longer worry about our fellow man or our fellow organisms, the fellow species, all the animals and plants in the world. We don't worry about it. We're caught up in a world that's all about making money, that's all about trying to get what you need and when you need it. What we need to worry about is trying to feed ourselves. Let's feed our family. Let's put food on the dinner table, not only for ourselves, but for every human being in the world. There is no excuse for anyone to starve in this world, ever, because we have more than enough food. We have more than we need in this world, and constantly food is being thrown away. So let's ship it somewhere. Let's give it to somebody, or let's help them grow their own food, because that's the only thing that we can do that will stop people from starving around the world. We have the ability to make a difference today, ladies and gentlemen. We can change the world. So don't stand by idly waiting for someone else to make a difference. Stand up every day and do what you can to help other people, to help the environment. If you find trash on the road, if you find it out in the woods, stop it or pick it up and throw it away or recycle it. And make sure that it doesn't end up in our streams. It doesn't end up in the natural habitat of so many animals that live in this area. If you see someone that needs your help, whether it's someone that needs to help putting food on the table or just someone that needs help with anything, help them as much as you can. Help your fellow men and women, because if we don't work together with all of our struggles, if we don't band together and try to fight and get over some of the things we're working through, then ultimately we will never get through the struggles that are in the future. The fact is, the economy is doing badly. There are people that can't make their house payments. There are people that can't make ends meet. But if we work together, there is no reason why we can't make a difference and actually help these people. We need to stop being greedy. We need to stop taking advantage of as many people as possible. And the world's corporations need to stop trying to just feed off the nation's poor. Right now we have a majority of the people in the world making the goods for the few. And this is something that needs to stop. Right now, we need to take care of the people that are taking care of us. We need to take care of the people that are on the bottom, because if without them, the top cannot stand. And if we don't work together, and if we don't take advantage of this time for change, and of this election, what will end up happening is we will just keep on trampling over those that need help. We will just keep on trampling over those that are trying to do their best and trying to make ends meet. And that cannot go on. So work together, help people who need it, and help the environment whenever you can. Because you can make a difference. You can change the world. You have the opportunity. Now take that opportunity. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
First Friday of every month, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll come with a new speech next time, okay?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes. Well, I think I might get up in my say to look at him. If we're gonna.
I'll go again real quick. Yeah, do that. We're pretty much done here, but
There have been a few times
what
we
we're
didn't
doing
have
here again.
signs.
September and October.
Good to
Go.
All right, man.
All right. So the reason why we're out here is this is the Two Rivers General Membership Branch of the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. We're out here to commemorate the 99th anniversary of the Missoula Free Speech Fights, which the Missoula Free Speech Fights led to a free speech movement across the West. So it was basically some folks came out here and challenged the fact that they weren't allowed to speak together in a group in public, and were arrested and actually filled the jails in Missoula. And so next year on this date, on October 3rd, we're going to be hopefully unveiling a new statue that's going to be of a soapbox to permanently commemorate this corner as the corner that started that movement, that free speech movement. So hopefully we'll see you all here next year, and a much bigger crowd. And we'll be here pretty much every warm month of the year, and hopefully we'll be here in November too. Hopefully it'll be warm enough to be out here. So
Next year we'll have John England here, and that'll be a bigger crowd by itself.
What day every month?
it's on the first Friday of every month. We commemorate this event.
Where are you at?
Oh, on the corner of Front and Higgins. Sorry, I should have said that.
All right.
All right, thanks.